I came across Safer, Sooner, Happier, not because I'd heard of it, because I'd known the people that were involved, Maria Moore and Marcus and a few others. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that this community was articulating things that I had thought better than I could have. So some of you might see that I'm starting to shamelessly steal some of your stuff into my own material. But it really is the best form of flattery. So, definitely all good intentions meant with that. So first things first, I do have a relatively new book that's came out called Organizing Towards Agility. It's probably one of the best things I can say about it is it's a uniquely Canadian book. I mean, it doesn't have Dunkin' Donuts in there, but it's got everything else but. And if anybody's interested, there's the code. And I'm pretty passionate about people who want to figure out operating models and structure that can actually enhance collaboration, enhance feedback, and that's the topic of both this book and this session. So I'll try to make myself seem a little bit interesting. Why Agile? Really, I started out as a software developer just before Agile was a thing, and the first wave of Agile really just made work more fun, to be honest. All that integration hell, all that testing hell, it sort of just went away with some of the Agile concepts. I really fell into organizational change and consulting by complete accident. A consulting firm said, hey, you've got the technical knowledge we need. Why don't you come join a consulting firm? And so I did. And then they actually started making me do consulting and kind of dragged me kicking and screaming. I really didn't want to. But then I started to learn to like it. And as I grew up, Agile did sort of at the same time, or I'll say agility kind of grew up. And so one of the good things I can say about that is I really have come by a lot of my experience, honestly. I don't think I'm particularly good at change management, consulting, or coaching, but I think I've done everything wrong at least once. And I think I've learned how to, from scraping my knees a few times. So, and the last thing I'll say about myself is I'm super lucky to have the family I do. My wife is also my chief life officer, and that she's the operating lead of our business, as well as, keeping the family going as well. So just everything I do, I want to thank her as well. So, I mean, as much as I'd like to talk about myself, it's probably boring for everybody else. Why don't we jump into it? I assume because people are attending the sort of Safer, Sooner, Happier meetup that they have some opinions and ideas around the state of the nation of Agile. But I thought I would do just a quick my summary of what I think is going on, and it's by no means the de facto truth, but how I'm seeing things and what was some of the inspiration for why I put the book together in the first place. Again, won't spend a lot of time here. I'm sure it's no surprise to everybody when we say that markets just continue to get more crowded, they continue to move faster. When I first wrote this book, certainly machine learning and AI wasn't the thing, but COVID was, and that was a massive disruption. So not only was the technology, what people were doing, the pace of that changing, but so is the very world around us causing disruption, whether it's through disease or environmental issues or whatever it is. The only thing that's been constant is the current state of acceleration, and that's probably been true since people have been decrying the old way of doing things for a long time, and it's really kind of reared its head since I started being a developer, which was way back in 2001 when Agile first started coming around, and then by the end of the aughts started to really become a thing, and probably every organization and their cousin was doing some sort of Agile transformation. Everyone wanted to be faster, everyone wanted to be shinier, everyone wanted to be cheaper, everyone wanted to do things better. And the recipe was we are going to stand up a whole bunch of Agile teams, we're going to adopt a whole lot of Agile practices, and then everything was going to change. And probably around 2006, 2007, when I was trying to create a Agile change management practice in Deloitte, and that wasn't the thing back then. I was super gung-ho about this, and I was trying to paint Agile everywhere I could. I had a lot of high, lofty ideals around what would happen. And then reality kind of set in after a few of these. not saying there wasn't any good things that happened out of this. I think there were lots of good things that happened about it, but I did become disillusioned over a time. At its worst, command and control would just keep the state of the nation the same. At its best, you'd have, all these agile teams that were actually running well, and we just ended up creating a whole bunch of new silos on top of the existing silos. Things were still taking a long time. Large enterprises still felt extremely complicated. And it didn't feel like agile was moving forward in the way that I wanted it to. And this is where I'm going to say this is one of the first things that I tend to talk to a lot of my clients about now, and I've shamelessly stolen some of this from Safer, Sooner, Happier, is I spend a lot of time now trying to convince clients not to do agile transformations. Because it seems to me that when agile transformations happen, it comes with a lot of baggage. It's not supposed to, but 9 out of 10 of the agile transformations that I've been a part of, and either because I came in at the tail end, or I came in midway through, or I was trying to negotiate, the focus was on a much bigger bang change than I liked. Huge emphasis on what my standardized agile methodology is going to be across the enterprise. Telling people what the change is going to be. And then one of the most interesting things I've seen, especially when doing agile with large consultancies, is dealing with silos of agile teams. So kind of 10, 16, 20 agile teams, all built in such a way as to almost minimize ownership in progress. So front-end teams, back-end teams, database teams, all these agile teams, in quotes, everywhere, but not really a lot of outcome-oriented ownership. So a lot of like agile methodology adoption, agile practices, agile mechanics, but very little organizational change. What's interesting is I'm going to walk you through the story of one of my clients, which is Scotiabank. Not because if you were to walk into Scotiabank and say, this is the gleaming model of a progressive, agile-oriented organization. The reason I'm going to walk you through this story is because it's an example of an organization that's gone from doing agile to trying to increase their agility to now going through this renewed focus on simplicity. And so the word that is going through at least all the areas that we're working with in Scotiabank right now is this is about simplicity. This is about making things easier for people to get things done. Because despite the last 17 transformations, whether it was Agile or ITIL or RUP or you name it, nothing's gotten easier. And so what are some of the things that you can do to make life easier for folks when they're trying to deliver value? And that's been our unerring focus. And I'm going to walk you through a bit of that journey. So again, shameless riff off of Safer, Sooner, Happier. We've asked people to stop talking about Agile and start talking about the outcomes they want to achieve. And literally tangible, specific business outcomes, and saying, okay, if those are the things you want to achieve, how is whatever we're going to do help you to achieve those outcomes? We're getting people away from their addiction to big change and into small incremental waves of change. And we'll talk about how a lot of people get very scared when you say stop with the standardized methodology. They need something to hold on to, right? And if they feel like the alternative to standardized methodology is chaos. So I'll walk you through some of the things that we've been doing as an alternative to the one-size-fits-all, everything in their kitchen sink methodology. And that's really operating principles and agreed upon norms. And getting away from, we're still very team focused, but what we're trying to use is the team as a focal point to help make changes to the whole system, so that we can go from this hierarchy, triangular type of organization into a more network, outcome-oriented, and decentralized one. So that's hopefully the story that I'll show you. Lots to talk about there, but we'll try to take it one step at a time. I'm going to pause if anybody has any kind of questions or comments, and if not, I'll keep going. Keep going. Anybody recognize this in an area they've worked in the past? It's just a bit of a mess. a coach, Marcus knows him well, Sean Deschamps and I, probably about one of our first clients at Agile by Design, this would probably describe the state of their office space better than anything else. Just file folders everywhere. No one's using the space. The place would feel what I like to call organizational zombies. Now, the problem with zombies is they seem inert. Like, it doesn't feel like anybody's getting actually anything done. There's no energy. There's no reaction. There's no responsiveness until you provoke one. Get too close to a zombie, they suddenly get really savage and they bite you. So there is lots of energy in organizational zombies, and they can be quite dangerous if you intervene in the wrong way. So we really, it really looked like this place had been defeated a long time ago. We were not asked to come into this area of the bank. Actually, let me stop. I'll give you a bit of a overview of Scotiabank. They're about 88,000 people. They've got a footprint in Canada, but also all over South America. So they're definitely an international bank. They've got every single banking service you could imagine, whether it's credit, whether it's capital markets, wealth, retail, international, you name it, it's all there. We were specifically asked to help in the payments group. And when we went to their headquarters, this is kind of the environment that we saw. And we were asked not to help shift towards more agility, not to help stand up an agile team. We were asked to help on an agile project or make a project agile, which we know a lot in the organization, in the community don't like to hear. Oh, great, we're doing an agile project. That will never work. So here's what we did. We said, we're going to help you make this project more agile. But the first thing we did is we said, okay, let's go and understand who's all involved in this project and what other projects are they on. And we got that information. And so what we said is, listen, we're going to help you create this waterfall agile sandwich is what this photograph is trying to convey here. But we want to explain what the vision is. The vision is eventually we're going to go through every one of these projects one by one. And if we can get them all onto the same team, we will. If not, we're going to figure out how to stand up some more teams. So we'll play it your way for 2 or 3 months. But are you open to teams? And they said, we will give you a distinct maybe. We're like, okay, good enough. So I don't think we had a lot of what you would call fertile grounds for agile success. End users weren't anywhere in sight. We're helping a team. It was called the Traces and Recall Solution, which was to help payments have better trace and recall functionality for their operational users. So when a payment failed, you could actually go and figure out what happened. Not an end user in sight. Few operational users we could get to. We had sparse, but definitely not embedded stakeholder access. Half the people on the teams were on other projects. And I think if you were trying to mention even the fundamentals of engineering craftsmanship, people would laugh you out the door. That was just a foreign concept. They're just nowhere even close. But the interesting thing that we did have is the head of that group from the technology department understood the vision. He's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to stand up teams, which we're very much about. You're trying to increase feedback and you're trying to increase collaboration. And so he understood, that he couldn't get the mandate to stand up the things that we wanted, but having somebody who understood the vision meant that we had somebody who knew how to grasp onto the opportunities and help us expand this. Anyone been in an enterprise organization where, every group had their own PMO? Like everyone had their own project management office? Few people are smiling. Well, we had an IT project management office. We had a business project management office. We had an enterprise project management office. That was both good. That was both bad, but it was also good because the business project management office didn't quite understand the vision, but they knew a good thing when they saw it and they were desperate to help. So they came running in and acted as the liaison to any business person we needed to get to. So we had this sort of like desperate business PMO who liked what they saw and came running to help. While the technologists, meaning the delivery people within IT, weren't what I would call big A agile software craftsmen, they were proud of their work. They liked their technology. Their leaders understood that by exposing them to new technology, giving them new opportunities, they could get good people. there was a pride in what they did. They wanted things to work, even if they weren't the textbook definition of the modern engineer. These people actually loved what they were getting done. This business also was the payments business, and at that time, payments had been a chronically underfunded industry, and so crypto had just started coming out, blockchain had just started coming out, payments had just started becoming a thing, and this group maybe must have numbered 60 people in total. Very quickly, in 2 or 3 years, expanded to 200, 300, 500. It's probably about 800 people in the group right now. Not just payments, but cash management in general. But this group was massively underfunded, and they had a need to expand, which means there's a desire to do things differently. What do? I would say I guess the last thing we'll say is the coaches who were there weren't attached to any particular dogma. One of the biggest problems I've seen with a lot of agile transformations is there's no real good starter set of things to do that you can take out of the box. It's all either go take this methodology, which is too light, or take that one that's too heavy, or take this one that's incomplete. So you really need some folks who aren't attached to the dogma, who can be pragmatic about what to apply and when to apply it. And that's what the team did. Some of the things we did, table stake stuff like Kanban, story mapping, getting these people into a mindset of flow. Probably the most important thing we did was just teaching them how to take big things and make them smaller. The reason that was so important is the program that we are on. Anyone been part of a project which got their funding cut halfway through and it's just a scramble and everything got wasted? Probably everybody who's worked in the enterprise. And of course, that happened halfway through this project. The good thing is we'd already created a shippable, releasable piece of code. It took us 6 to 8 weeks to do it, but it was a 4-month project, and we had something to ship. So remember our IT project leader we talked about? He's just like, well, if you look at how much we spent on the agile coaches, and we look at the ROI is the value of that entire first release, because that would have all been thrown out the door. So he did that to create an ROI model around the value of agile coaching and started selling that to his peers and his bosses. So that simple act of thin slicing probably saved this transformation because we had something to show at the door. So, what we tried to do is stand up what I consider, and most people probably agree, the smallest component of a new operating model, which is, your team. And I'll put in brackets agile powered, but it's not necessarily about agile. You could be using lean or design thinking or lean startup or whatever you want to get feedback. But a combination of operating models, principles, techniques that enable cross-functional collaboration to get people as close to their users as possible. The reason I say, or is it, sort of at the bottom of this section, is we were very gung-ho on applying practices to teams that were the standard things, small increments of value, flow, all this kind of good stuff. But we quickly started to run into a problem. Has anyone ever been part of a cross-functional team of siloed team members? Does anyone know what I mean by that? I don't know, you have 3 BAs, 5 developers, and 2 testers, and Partridge and a product owner. And the user experience, people have user experience stories, and the BAs have the BA. I mean, that's just the symptom of the problem, but everybody's working on their own. And you're almost seeing the symptoms of a waterfall organization in a microcosm. Seen it and lived it. Yes, lots of people have seen this, right? And it's funny because I guess unless I try to say I've stepped away from methodology, I love my agile methods. I love my agile practices. I'm the kind of person who learns a new thing and tries it in a team. And I couldn't understand why people weren't doing that. And what I kind of realized is so many agile transformations fail because you try to scale it, when what you really need to do is descale it down to the individual team member. These are my ideal agile team members working on a web-based dashboard. Okay, I'm going to just leave that pun there in the air for a minute, and then I'm just going to keep going.
Nice.
And so we started asking ourselves, do we even know what a good team member is? And how does a good team member behave? It's all about the interactions and engagements, but how do they interact and engage? And we started to describe what we thought we wanted to see in people. One of them is thriving under conditions of autonomy, being very comfortable in a hyper collaborative mode, pairing, swarming, mobbing, co-creating, pick your poison, but extremely important for that. Gravitating towards visual and open methods, willing to be helicopter shaped, and striving for feedback. And what we did is we started to describe these attributes to our leaders and say, these are the things we need to look for in every one of these teams that we stand up. If we don't have at least a couple of these people in those teams doing these things, we shouldn't be doing any more teams. So we actually took a step back with this team for quite a while and started describing what some of this meant and started coaching these things in specifics. And what I want to do is I'm going to skip down one. This is just an example of what we would do. Is we take some very, very kind of familiar, value stream oriented, Kanban oriented. Let's define the workflow. What we did is said it's not enough just to define it. What we first want you to do is describe this kind of area of the workflow and ask yourself, are you core? Like, are you like, the defender? Like, think of it as a hockey game and you're in defense. Are you in the defense position here? Or when the puck comes to the back and there's no one else, are you adjacent? Are you kind of just pinch hitting in? Or are you just not involved at all? So it's almost like we asked everybody to just start describing themselves in terms of core, adjacent, or just no skill, want to learn it, or no skill, don't want to learn it. And we asked everybody to kind of map themselves across the value stream so that they could see themselves in numbers of positions. And what was interesting by doing this, and we had to revisit this quite a few times, is people started playing this, well, I'm a prime over here, but as soon as I'm not busy over here or something is more important downstream or upstream, you can call on me. And people started calling on each other a little bit more. That took about, longer than I want to admit, 3 to 6 months of us trying this and practicing it and trying it and practicing it. The next level of kind of detail we went into was saying, okay, where do any of these teamwork patterns take place? And all we did was we took the agile pairing, mobbing, swarming. For those of you not familiar, co-creation is just the idea of taking something like a story map or a business model canvas and working on it in a group and making sure that everybody participates. And we started asking ourselves, where can these sort of hyper collaborative examples take place and where does it make sense? And so where can we mob? Where can we pair? Where can we swarm? Where do we, and more importantly, where do we not want to do those things? Because the team did not want to pair all the time. They did not want to swarm or mob all the time. There's a mix of when and where to do this. And so this model became something that we were able to refine over time. With the whole idea of engaging in these practices. So some of these will be very, very familiar to people in the community, but I guess for me, being a bit of a methods and techniques and tools person, I had to create first-class citizens around these to kind of really get a critical mass going. So the idea here now is the core building block of any organization is the team member, and the team member is somebody who's evolving their ability to operate with a sense of teaming, the ability to engage with others in a highly collaborative way. And the reason I think that a teaming team member is more important even than the teams is because teams grow, teams retire, teams start up, teams die. But team members, if you have really resilient team members, your ability to form teams, to grow in the sense of teamwork, it just goes up over time. The next thing that I've seen really be valuable in these kinds of organizations is something that you might have heard different people call it different things. I think George P. Dwindle calls it the three amigos. Others call it the feature cell. And it's every time a little piece of work comes along, you go and you group into this group of tight-knit friends that you're going to work on that piece with. So I'll explain that a little more in a bit. And it's a real tight-knit group of 2 to 3 people that get something done in a very short period of time. Then you get into that kind of classic agile team. And then the last piece I'm going to talk to you about as I go forward is, especially in enterprise kind of context, is this idea of an ecosystem, which is a group of teams that have a common mission, common set of users, maybe a common platform, and why that I think is extremely important, especially in enterprise settings. All right, Let's go to the team of teams then. So we talked a bit about people and teams. Let's go back to this group. They're starting to operate with a sense of teamwork. Thanks to that business PMO that I talked about, all of the demand of the entire organization is now getting funneled into this team because stuff's actually getting done. Now, here's the problem. We had a room, and it was a pretty big room. Probably could fit 20 to 30 people, probably about 55 to 60 people in this room, and all starting to become part of this team. And maybe I exaggerate. You might have heard this quote that 75% of all metrics mentioned by a consultant are made up. Okay, I'm just going to leave that one in the air too. I'm just not going to, I'm just going to keep going. But it was extremely large, and it was a victim of its own success. The stand-ups, the backlog grooming sessions, refinement sessions. We really shouldn't groom anything anymore. All the cadences started to have the feeling of bureaucracy. Let's go to the stand-up and let's wait 30 minutes while X number of people go through what they did yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And it really started. It was so big that there was enough leadership there that people didn't feel like they could actually talk and be honest about what was going on. So a lot of people say, hey, now it's time for SAFe. Like we've got more than 5 teams or 3 teams worth of people. We need a really heavy agile methodology to kind of fix things, right? That's what we have to do next. I'm one of these people that believes that agile, if you're being liberal about the definition of agile, so I'll call it the agile verse. There's like the mirror universe versions of agile. If you take all those versions of agile together, it has everything you need it to scale. You don't actually need a framework to make it scale. And when I say that, I'm not talking about story points and velocity and what I did yesterday, today, tomorrow, and sort of all this stuff that is to me. I don't want to offend anybody when I say this, but there's some of this stuff that comes across as very cargo culty, comes across as we're doing it just because. When I talk about agile and agility, I'm really talking about this notion of, like, if I were to describe agile at scratch, it's you've got a group of people. They look at a whole bunch of options or demands or a backlog, whatever we call it, and they say, you know what, let's do just enough research and discovery to understand what the priority of the thing is that we should work on, and how do we organize around that work. At the team level, you'd call that the pair. They say, okay, who's going to be in this pair, and we're going to work on this little piece of value together. They get it done. They test it. Then the larger group gets together and say, did we pair appropriately? Are we organizing around the value effectively? This idea of looking at what's coming and then making a discussion of not just what work to do, but how to organize around it is inherently scalable in the face of complexity. Let's go back and I'll tell you what I mean by that with this Scotiabank story. A lot of people would have said, hey, if you've got too many people in a team, just break it up into 3 teams. Fill your boots, got 3 separate teams, 3 separate backlogs, should just work out of the box. The problem is that this larger group of people all shared a common platform. They had the same customer base, and they really had a common purpose. They're trying to digitize payments for small and medium-sized customers. And they wanted to maintain a common identity. The leadership, the more senior people, they saw benefits in staying together. So here's kind of what they did. Is they took this large, first of all, they visualized everything on a Kanban system. It was very simple at first, had sort of the major states you'd see in any kind of, product, discovery and delivery kind of approach. And they broke it up by what they called pods, or cells, you could call it whatever you like, which were groups of people that were just, about the size of your standard agile team. And a subset of them were permanent. Your senior technical person, somebody who really understood the product well, and your sort of agile coach / scrum master style kind of delivery lead type person, and maybe 1 or 2 others, and they stayed relatively stable. But what tended to float around and change every once in a while were the people that knew how to work on highly specialized systems, back office systems, legacy systems, integration systems, and that would tend to get reassigned on a month-by-month, larger feature-by-feature basis. And what ended up happening, though, is because this group was, between 35 and 50 people, there was enough social density to understand how to form into these pods. while maintaining this social connectivity to have a shared alignment, a shared understanding, a shared appreciation of the outcomes and the goals. They used a combination of cadences, the classic, team level ones, stand-ups, planning, retros, all that kind of good stuff. But they supplemented them with higher level ones that happened less often, but had a rotating cast of members. So they became about, it was very organic, but it was basically the invention of what we call an ecosystem. And an ecosystem is this idea that you likely, when you have a set of teams that are highly interdependent with each other, you don't try to manage that with traditional or waterfall structure. You take the idea of cadences, of visualization, a collaboration, and you scale it up one level, basically. I'm sure a few of you have heard of Dunbar's number, because I think this is a pretty educated lot. So what we tried to do is and I'm going to walk you through a story of another one of my clients, because it was his idea, not mine. He had something called the onion model of organizational design. And the onion model was pretty simple. You start at the smallest level of the onion, and you say, can I put a person in that level of the onion? And the answer is yes. You've got a member who's fully allocated to that level of the onion. The answer is no, you go to the next level. Can I make them full-time there? The answer is yes, great. The answer is no, they go up a level. And you keep going through everybody in your entire organization if you've got them somewhere in the onion. This is a very simplified version of that onion that we did for the payments group. We had the feature cells, 3 to 5 people. They always called them a lab because this is around 2000, 2015, 2016. No one liked the word agile team. Everything had to be a lab. I don't know. I think we're starting to get away from that now. But they had this team, which tended to get bigger than we wanted it to do. And then what we did is we broke it up into the much smaller, tight-knit groups. And what we noticed is that the level of stability in the smallest layer, 50% stable at best, quite flexible. The next level, pretty stable, but still a bit of churn back and forth. At the next highest level, it was quite stable. So I'm not saying these are the exact numbers you have to use, but we've noticed that for us at least, we're deploying things in the enterprise, having a narrow focus on these 3 levels and putting a set of either visualization, operating cadences, or both around them was highly effective. And of course, not all areas need all 3 levels. I'm going to pause again if there's any discussions or questions. If not, I'll keep going. So this is probably an eye chart, and I apologize, but I showed you that previous work where we said, hey, agile teams work because they've got good insight into what's coming in. They then decide what the priority is, and then they organize into smaller groups to get that work done, and then they do it again. That's the active pair programming, by the way. Let's go form a pair, get some work done, do it again. That scales. So having longer-lived backlogs or longer-lived visual flow, you can use either metaphor if you're an agilist or more of a leanist or both. That's why I have them both at the top row up there, sort of like the sprint view as well as the kind of flow view. If you've got a view into what's coming in and you can use visualization to increase that insight, you can actually democratize the active organization. And obviously, some organizations democratize that into far bigger scales than I could ever dream of. I'm much more used to the 15 to 50. And if it's a huge organization, I ask, how can I break it up into chunks of 15 to 50 so that you can have some democratization around who goes into what team? Because people can now look at the backlog. They can have an understanding of the capabilities required to get something done, and they can swarm around the value. What's interesting is I'm sure a lot of people have heard and probably are sick to death of hearing about the Spotify model, right? Everybody and their cousin wants to adopt the Spotify model. I went and spoke to, part of the inspiration of this was speaking to one of the delivery leads at Spotify who I'd met at a Kanban conference. And he said, yeah, we don't do that. We do portfolio Kanban. We've got a lead in each swim lane of the portfolio. The lanes are determined by domains, or sometimes they're determined by experiences. It depends on the amount of collaboration required. And we dynamically swarm around them, and then we go back into the pool. And it was a completely dynamic virtual team. And I was like, wow, amazing. So he's like, yeah, don't listen. The propaganda was wrong the moment the ink dried. And it's interesting to see that taking place in such an innovative area. I've also got, very many use cases where we've been doing that in much more standard enterprise settings. The key to this is it's not completely dynamic. It's as dynamic as the people's ability to form connective relationships with other people is. So you're not just telling people they have to go from team to team to team to team. There is enough stability in there, but as soon as the demand comes in that requires a change in the operating model and org structure, we can have an intelligent conversation about how to make those changes. How am I doing for time?
Jeff, we've got about 18 minutes left to the hour mark.
Amazing. I'm actually, I'm talking so fast. I'm actually staying on track. So that's great. Again, I'm going to pause and would by the way, I'm okay with people challenging some of the things I'm saying because I don't always explain it as articulately as I'd like to. And I might have glommed over something that's by challenging it, you'll let me know if I missed something that was probably important to making this successful. Okay. I still end up doing a lot of work with big consultancies. I've done some work with McKinsey, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, Partridge in a Pear Tree. Sorry, I'm using that a lot today, or in the last year alone. And the biggest problem we have with working with these consultancies is Agile is described in such a complicated way that you can't even tell where the value is anymore sometimes. It just becomes this big blueprint. So what I've tried to do, this is something that came into my book at the last irresponsible moment as a result of working with some of these consultancies, is really distill down what agility means to me. And I meant to cross out Agile here and say safer, sooner, happier, but I'm sorry, I just didn't get to this slide in time. The best way to get to a new working model is describing Agile simply as a strategy, very simple strategy. You put people in teams. Those teams are as multidisciplinary as they possibly can be. You put those teams as close as you can to their end users as possible, and you coach those teams to get feedback from their users so they can learn what to do next. And you do that because there's too much uncertainty in your organization and you require a strategy to mitigate that uncertainty. Anything else is optional as far as I'm concerned. And I apologize if I admitted something important to somebody else by doing this, but I really want to make it about teams with close market contact, and they're doing that because things are ambiguous, uncertain, or complex. And if you do anything that helps you move in that direction, that to me is Agile. And if you're doing stuff that helps you move away, then that to me is traditional. And it doesn't matter how far along the spectrum you are, or all this sort of like Kanban but, Scrum but, everything else but. I'm like, I'm doing my best to excise that from my own vocabulary as well as anybody else that I talk to. It's got to be an incremental path forward. I love the safer, sooner, happier mantra of impediments are the path, because it's the act of removing those impediments and increasing yourself towards those model that makes you agile. It's not actually that you got there. That doesn't really matter. I promised people that I was going to talk to them about how fit for purpose makes the traditionalists uncomfortable because they feel like it's anarchy. And I promised to show you what I've been doing as an alternative. This is something borrowed from Gil Broza's work on the Agile mindset. If anybody hasn't read it, even if you just read the first couple of chapters, I highly recommend it. The reason I liked his work, and I've distilled it down and simplified it, is it gives you something to align to, which is principles, values, observable behaviors. We want people to work in finer grained increments of value. Okay, if that's what we want to see, I don't care if you use user stories, use cases, process flow diagrams, it doesn't matter what it is. Did you get to more frequent incremental value? Yes or no? If we want to see people working in self-organizing teams, but it's funny, like the being agile versus doing agile, the problem with being agile, at least for me, was it came across as very motherhoody and as like a state of being, right? And it wasn't tangible. And so it was only till I read Gil Broza's work that I was like, oh, a mindset can be observed. And it can be observed through a set of agreed upon operating principles, but it's agnostic of methodology. It's agnostic of method and tool. So we spent a lot of work at Scotiabank, which is I'm quite proud of, where we actually went through this and made there's so much within the agile verse. It's not even funny. A set of principles and behaviors that we saw that we wanted to see, and we keep asking ourselves, are we moving forward? Are we moving forward? And getting away from, but are you doing Scrum? But do you have Jira? But do you? We're trying to minimize that as much as possible, to the point of almost taking it out of the conversation completely. But there are dragons. We have taken this too far, and I've told you I don't do things well because I do them well. I do them well because I do them wrong. One of the problems with this mindset approach, and I've seen a few other coaches do this too by listening to them, is they start assessing people on the things that they're observing. Oh, this team is doing 20 of the 50 observable behaviors, and that team is doing 15. How do we get them from 15 to 20? Even though it's agnostic of methodology, and even though it's agnostic of method, if you go too far down the let's go observe behaviors and evaluate ourselves on them, you get into the common trap that you see in all maturity frameworks, which frankly, the biggest one is avarice. Oh yeah, I'll fill out whatever you want me to fill out, agile coach. Just, can you let me get back to my job? All the way down to, and we've had this, we feel like you're mansplaining us, person-splaining us, talking down to us, coach agile-splaining us. There, I've come up with a new term. We're being agile-splained, basically, and being talked down to. So there's a lot of defensiveness that comes when you say, hey, here's how we're supposed to behave versus here's how we want to behave. One of the things I'm most proud of is getting executive buy-in, not only at Scotiabank, but another one of our clients, MSC Direct, where we haven't thrown out the operating principles. And by the way, these operating principles are just ones that I like. There's nothing in here about reducing toil through engineering and a whole lot of other good stuff. So you would have to figure out, everyone's going to have their own list of operating principles. But instead of going down the, let's go and just observe behavior, let's go and ask, is our operating structure enabling the strategy? Yes or no? And let's go figure out ways to count, is it or not? Self-organizing teams. Of all the things a team could do to be self-managing, what percentage of those things do they have no permission to do, limited permission to do, must work with others to do, etc.? And we came up with a score. One team self-scored it, and they were like at 20% or something. And management looked at that and was quite ashamed. And they didn't realize the limited amount of autonomy that their teams actually had. The other one, frequent market feedback. That's probably the easiest one. I went and showed these metrics to the CIO of Scotiabank. And he said, I think I want to cry because we've been doing Agile for 7 years. And I bet you I think we probably release every 8 months at most, and probably every couple of years at worst, unless it's, a small incremental change. So the lead time to get something to production to the customer had not gone down noticeably at all. So don't do an Agile transformation, do a lead time reduction transformation. Same with the amount of unfinished work, the size of the increments, the amount of improvements going through the door. These are things that get out of the realm of opinion into the realm of metrics and measurement. So starting to have a lot more fun with these. Almost done, promise. Again, I didn't come up with the onion model, but I wanted to show you an example of the onion model at scale. So this is a real business. This is Capital One Canada. They're exclusively a credit card business. This was Brent Reynolds' idea. He was then the head of branded cards, and then later on became promoted to be their chief customer experience officer. And he was like, Jeff, I love all this stuff that you're showing me, but here's how we're going to do it. And he literally had these lanes that were basically, think of them as a customer segment, like so subprime customers or upmarket cards or whatever. And then sometimes they'd be based on a customer journey. And then he'd get inside them and start having discrete outcomes for each of those segments. And then what happened is anytime he couldn't put somebody into a team, he put them outside and said, you're either, and by the way, I'm the one who helped them with this, so I get some credit here. Anybody who's outside that is either a traveler or an enabler. Travelers come in and they help do work with the team. They pair with the work, but there's no handoffs. You don't go to that. Team A never goes to Team B and says, do some work for me. Team A can go to Team B and say, come and help me with my work, and I will either travel to you or you will either travel to me. So this traveling, pairing, remember all that teaming I said that was so important, those team members? Well, those resilient team members are so important because they had to figure out how to work in teams that weren't theirs. And it happened all over the place. And of course, we just created these technology enabler model to support all of those teams. And the last thing we'll talk about is getting comfortable with the fact that your org model is always going to be wrong, and that value leadership and capability leadership became hats that every leader had to wear. And typically, most leaders would wear 2 of them. I'm not going to get into the exact how we did it. These are just examples of, I'll say proof. We've actually done it, and if anyone wants a deeper dive on some of these models and how they work, ping me. Maybe we'll do like a follow-up deep dive on operating models and how to set them up kind of session. I'm going to stop because, again, too many slides for the time, and I apologize. And I'm going to pause for questions from anybody.